Hello, my loves, and welcome to the very first episode of 2025 on the Fearless Femme Podcast with your host, Becky Jane Stevenson, Women's Identity and Confidence Mentor. I hope that you all got to bring in 2025 with some joy and a little bit of sass, or just breathing a little sigh of relief that 2024 is done with and we can start this whole new chapter, a whole clean slate, or whatever metaphor works best for you. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like this year is the one where we just stop surviving and actually start truly thriving. I know that sounds really cliche, but I don't know, I just feel like there has been such a big exhale and shift in energy, even with this first week of January. It's just, I don't know, I can't describe it. Maybe it's a collective thing, but we're going to run with it. So welcome to a brand new season on the podcast, and this season is all about becoming a good woman to yourself first. Because, as you know, we can't really pour from an empty cup. And honestly, being the good girl for everyone else isn't where your power lives. It's in being the real you, being bold and being unapologetically you. And that's what we're going to be focusing on for a little while. And today, in this episode, we're diving headfirst into that very topic. The one that hits home for so many of us, including me. So going from surviving to thriving. So let's break down what that really looks like and why you and so many of us get stuck in survival mode. And most importantly, how you can flip the script on that and actually start living in a way that actually feels really good and feels real instead of feeling like some exhausted pigeon. So grab your coffee, your tea, or whatever it is that makes you feel fancy, and let's dig in. So let's start here. Survival mode. She's familiar, isn't she, for so many of us, and especially for me, the last 3 months were a real, I don't want to say slog, but they have not been easy. And survival mode really is waking up and feeling that level of exhaustion. It's going through the motions and doing what you have to do instead of it being what you want to do. It's putting everyone else first, because if you stop juggling even one ball, then the whole circus will collapse, right? And I get it. You maybe got mouths to feed, bills to pay, responsibilities stacked higher than the little bit of patience that you have left. But survival really isn't living. And if it's one thing that I learned in the last quarter of 2024 was like coming out of survival mode as well is no joke. Like when you take a step back to breathe, to exhale, to simply be with yourself, coming out of survival mode can be really, it can be like trying to wade through treacle. Let's be honest, it's not great either, but the alternative being in survival mode all of the time isn't realistic either. So when you're in survival mode, everything just feels really reactive, right? You're not choosing, you're just simply responding. You're responding to the demands that are placed on you. You're responding to things that you think you should be doing. You respond to things that you read online that just trigger the shit out of you, right? And it's like you're a firefighter. You're running around like a headless chicken, constantly putting out the flames, but never really stopping to rebuild the house. And that's what I want this season on the Fearless Femme podcast to really zone in on, to really focus on, and to help you ladies start to move out of survival mode and more into what you actually do want, what you want for yourself, what your needs are, and most importantly, how to get those needs met. So let me ask you something. Is survival mode really how you want to live? Running on fumes and literally giving from the dregs of your energy, always feeling like you're just one bad day away from crumbling, like there's not enough left in the tank. You you're pumping the pedal but you're not moving. Like, I totally get that. So I want to tell you on this podcast that there is another way. Like, thriving and being with yourself and actually liking your reflection in the mirror isn't just for other people and other people around you that just seem to have all their ducks in a row and, you know, got all their shit together. Like, it is for you too. Like, let's do away with you need all the ducks in a row before you can actually start moving forward. Let's just have ducks. Let's just lower that expectation bar just a little bit, instead of piling the weight on yourself trying to change it all in one go, because, you know, there's also that cliche of new year, new me, claptrap that gets peddled everywhere. And if we're being completely honest, the amount of New Year's resolutions you've probably made for yourself in the past, how many of them you actually seen through to the end? Like, no judgment here. I have done it too. So what does thriving even mean? Because that word is thrown around a lot, right? But what does it even mean? What does thriving look like for you? And I think as women, we don't stop to really ask ourselves that question. How does thriving in life look for us? Because it's going to look different for every single one of you. Like, it's not about having it all together. It's not about having shit handled without breaking a sweat. It doesn't mean that you're perfect or that life stops throwing its curveballs at you. But thriving really is about feeling grounded and powerful in who you are, even when life gets messy. And this is like a big key foundation piece, even for me as a mother of 5, you know, navigating the system for multiple SEND children, running a business, having my own physical health needs. Like, life can get really chaotic and get really messy, but we don't have to attach those things as part of who we are and our identity. It's like, they're external things, and it's when we start identifying as those things when it gets messy that we run into some real trouble, and we start shaming ourselves and judging ourselves, and it just adds more layers onto the stuff that you're just trying to work through. So let's do away with identifying as somebody who's surviving in life. It's really more about waking up with purpose instead of dread. You know, it's saying no without feeling guilty, because let's face it, you know, we're going to feel guilty when we start asking for those needs to be met and meeting our own needs by ourselves as well. And the thing is that guilt isn't there to tell you that you're doing it wrong. It's actually the sign that we're doing it right. It means that we're breaking the habits and the patterns that we've been in for so long. Like, it's about pouring more love, more time, and more energy into yourself without being sorry for it. Like, thriving really is more about living boldly. It's daring to take up that space in a world that is always trying to make you feel smaller. It's walking with purpose, walking with intention, and actually living a life that feels good to you, not one that checks somebody else's boxes. And, you know, thriving isn't about getting somewhere. It's about becoming someone, reconnecting to who you are, coming home to yourself. It really is about becoming. So let's talk about how we get from surviving to thriving, because I know that some of you are listening right now and thinking, this all sounds great, but how, Bex? How do I get there? What do I do? And this is also a really frequent and common question that I see coming up in, like, on places like TikTok and Reels. People in the comments that find the really motivating, inspiring videos and advice and this and that and the other. And sure, it's motivating and it's inspiring and it fires us up, but it actually doesn't tell us how to do the damn thing. And that's why you have me. So thriving actually starts with really small intentional shifts. You aren't supposed to wake up one day magically transformed. You start by planting the seeds and watering them daily, like nurturing it. Because if you try to change too much too quickly, you actually end up having the opposite effect to what you wanted. You actually end up feeling really overwhelmed because we're trying to change too much, and your body and your brain is like, whoa, this is too much. It's almost like, let's go back to the driving analogy, it's almost like trying to go from first gear straight into fifth. What happens to the car, unless you're driving an automatic obviously, but what happens to the car? It does the bunny hops, or it stalls. Like, your brain and your body is just going to go, whoa, you need to slow down. So it really is about starting with those small things that you feel slightly uncomfortable with changing, because that's the thing with comfort zones and stretch zones and all the rest of it. It's not about jumping from straight from your safe zone right into way out there. It's going to be done gradually, where it's uncomfortable enough that you can sit with it. So I'm going to give you some steps in this episode to really start planning out how you're going to shift out of survival mode. And it's no small feat. It's a huge deal. But again, we have to start small, and we have to know where we want to go, what it is that we want to change, what it is that we're not happy with. So here are the steps. I'm going to break them down. You can take out a piece of paper and a pen and jot them down, or you can just simply be with yourself and think about these things. So the first one is really to get real about where you are right now. So the first thing is to just really take stock. What are you surviving right now? What are the things that are going on, the fires that are around you? Is it in your relationships, your work, your health? Call it out. Like, really call it out. Get honest with yourself. Say, this is some bullshit. Like, I'll give you a real life example of that one in a sec. But just really get honest with yourself, because you really can't thrive if you're not willing to face the parts of your life that aren't working well for you. So a real example of that is I recently found some physical health results that had somehow been withheld from me, that just really opened my eyes and just shifted things. And it was the wake-up call that I needed, and I really had to have a look at what was working in my life and what wasn't working, what I needed to pivot on, which is my favourite word ever, what I needed to change, what needed to shift, so that it would still allow for me to do the things that I love to do, instead of quitting, basically. So I had to take stock with where I'm at. So step 2 is to focus on one thing. Choose one thing off that list. And one of the tips that I usually give is not to start with the biggest. Like, obviously we're going to have lots of things that we want to change, and we want to get really specific. But if you go for that top thing, it's likely you're going to either talk yourself out of it, it's going to feel too uncomfortable, which will make you retreat like a hermit, and you're just going to shove it in a box and never dare to look at it again. So it's really important that we choose one thing to focus on that isn't at the very top, but just a few levels down, so that you can adjust and you can sit with the uncomfortable feelings that surface until they no longer feel uncomfortable, and then you can move on to the next thing. So when you're in survival mode, everything feels urgent. Everything feels like a fire you've got to put out right now, and you're pulled in every which direction. But here's the little secret I want to give you. You don't have to fix everything at once. Just choose one area of your life and focus there. Maybe it's taking 10 minutes every day just for yourself, taking a bit longer in the bath, putting a spin cycle on for the second time so that you can have that 5 minutes peace for yourself. Maybe it's finally setting that boundary that you've been avoiding, or saying no to a demand of you that you really didn't want to keep saying yes to. So think about one small thing that you can start focusing on, and when you start seeing success with that, then obviously that motivates you to wanting to change other things. You start to feel a little bit more bolder, you start to feel a little bit more confident in yourself, a little bit more grounded, a little bit more connected. Step 3 is to take up space without apology. And a lot of gurus and coaches and mentors out there say take up space unapologetically, but what does that even mean either? Like, really, it is what it says on the tin. It's not apologizing for being who you are. It's not apologizing for existing and being in this world. It's not apologizing for having needs and having those needs met. It's not apologizing for having boundaries and standards for yourself. You know, there's so many different ways that we can spin taking up space without apology. But this is where it really does get juicy. So start reclaiming space for yourself, for your needs, for your energy, for your own well-being. And that means saying no when you mean it and choosing rest over people pleasing. And it means looking in the mirror and knowing, like, the reflection that you see looking back at you is enough just as you are, even if you don't fully believe it yet. Like, when you focus on that one thing and you get real about where you are and you do these steps, it becomes easier and easier to start liking your reflection, to start liking who you are in this world and seeing your worth and your value, and that your worth and your value isn't tied to how many people you can please, how many people that you can keep happy. Like, at the end of the day, we can't make everybody happy. Your only responsibility is for making yourself happy first. Like, you go first. And it is hard, and you will feel guilty, and you will feel selfish, and the whole term be a villain and be in your villain era isn't actually for other people calling you a villain because you had a boundary. It's actually feeling like a villain, feeling guilty, like you're a bad person and that you're selfish for putting yourself first and all the rest of it. Like, that's what being in your villain era can feel like. But that guilt and those feelings of selfishness is really, like I said earlier, it's just that sign that you are starting to break the rules that you were never meant to follow in the first place. It's that sign that you are shifting habits, that you are shifting your mindset, that you are rewiring your brain. So absolutely, your brain isn't going to know what the hell you're doing because it's been so used to pleasing everybody else. It's been so used to making everybody else happy and, you know, just carrying all of this weight. Like, it's not going to know what you're throwing at it, but within time, you will start to shift the way that the brain reacts to putting yourself first, to taking up that space without apology. So, you know, thriving in life really isn't a destination. It's not an end goal. It's actually a way of living. It's the daily actions in showing up for yourself daily, even when it feels really uncomfortable. So I really do urge you to take these steps smaller. Even if they feel messy, that's okay. Even if they're imperfect, that's okay too. Because every time that you show up for yourself, you are rewriting the narrative, you are rewriting that story that you're telling yourself, and you are literally rewriting your brain. And you are telling yourself and the world that you matter every time that you step up for yourself. And trust me, when you can do that, that's when everything starts to change. The whole trajectory of your life can start to change, and it's honestly one of the best things that can happen. It was one of the best things that happened to me, and there's been multiple of the clients that I've worked with that have either gone all in for themselves and made some really bold, drastic decisions. And it's been the decisions that have been the most incredible, most empowering ones. We've had clients that have handed their notice into the job. Now, I'm not saying that's what you need to do, but this was like an accumulation of just really being unhappy. And I've had 2 clients now that have done that, and then they've gone on to create their business and show up in ways that they didn't think they could. And it's just, it's so amazing to watch that and see how women can transform. And like I said, it doesn't have to be the big, massive, drastic changes and decisions that you make. You can start small, because at the end of the day, this is your story, it's nobody else's. So I'm going to leave you with this. Thriving isn't about doing more. It's about being more you. It's about being more for yourself, stepping out of survival mode and daring to live for yourself first without apology. So this season, we're going to be diving deeper into what it means to be a good woman for yourself, to choose you, to rise into the woman that you've always been beneath the noise, the guilt and the expectations. So I'm going to set you some homework and I've never done this on a podcast, so I'm really interested to see how this is going to work, and I would really love your thoughts. If anything in this podcast has really landed for you, please do reach out to me, Becky Jane Stevenson, on Facebook, or you can drop me an email through my website, beckyjanestevenson.com. I would really love to see and to hear from you what steps you're going to be implementing, what's changing. Like, honestly, come and tell me these things. Like, I live for it. So the homework is to take one small step this week towards thriving. Just one. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be massive. It can be a small thing. It just has to be yours, your step, your decision. And like I said, if this episode hit home, share it with a friend, and let's start this new year by rising together. And I will see you, or speak to you, next week, my loves. And until then, keep showing up for you.